The Glory of the Lord. Union Gospel Press Bible Expositor and Illuminator, Winter Quarter, December, January, February 2025 through 2026. Teaching the lesson through Heart of the Lesson for December 7th, 2025. Who is God? Lesson text, Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 through 23. Related scriptures, Exodus 19, verses 7 through 25, chapter 33, verses 1 through 11, chapter 34, verses 29 through 35, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 7 through 18, and Psalm 103, verses 6 through 14. Time, 1446 BC. Place, Mount Sinai. Golden text. And he said, Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. Exodus 33:20. Introduction. Our first unit of the quarter delves into the holiness of God's presence. One of the overarching themes of the whole Bible is God's unfolding plan to dwell among his people as their God. Ezekiel 37:27, Revelation 21:3. But a huge obstacle stood in the way of that plan. Sinful humans cannot get near God's holiness. Moses encountered that obstacle firsthand when the Israelites worshipped a golden calf in the wilderness and provoked the Lord to anger. The immediate consequences of that sin were bad enough, as many of the people died. But the worst part was the pronouncement God made in Exodus 33:3. I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. Moses' intercession in today's text came as a direct result of that gut-wrenching statement. In the process, Moses made 3 astonishing requests. Lesson outline. 1. Astonishing request number 1, Exodus 33:12 through 13. 2. Astonishing request number 2, Exodus 33:14 through 16. 3. Astonishing request number 3, Exodus 33:17 through 19. And 4. Inherent limitations for Moses, Exodus 33:20 through 23. Exposition verse by verse, Exodus 33:12 through 23. 12. And Moses said unto the Lord, See, thou sayest unto me, Bring up thy people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in my sight. 13. Now therefore I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. 14. And he said, My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. 15. And he said unto him, If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. 16. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not in that thou goest with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth? 17. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. 18. And he said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. 19. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before thee, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before thee. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. 20. And he said, Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. 21. And the Lord said, Behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock. And it shall come to pass, while my glory passes by, that I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass. 23. And I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. Preparing to teach the lesson. In a world that tends to focus exclusively on love, God's holiness is often overlooked. We prefer studying God's fatherhood and his adoption of us as children, the ways he has brought us nearer to himself. Yet if we are to nourish our relationship with God and deepen our worship of him, we must study the glory of his holiness. In our first lesson of the quarter, we see that God's holiness and glory are interrelated. Moses could not stand the full glory of God, in part because of God's perfect holiness. At the same time, being in God's presence transformed Moses and worked in him greater holiness, just as it should for us. Today's aim, facts. To see how Moses interceded for the Israelites and how God responded by showing him his glory. Principle. To understand that God's holiness and glory are an integral part of his character. Application. To transform our lives by the glorious presence of God, which distinguishes us from those who do not trust in Jesus. Introducing the lesson. Have you ever been tempted to give up on someone who was difficult? Perhaps ending a friendship or avoiding a family member? God could have given up on the Israelites, whom he had rescued from slavery in the land of Egypt. Instead of following him, they constantly rebelled and treated him like a false god. Our passage for this lesson occurs after the incident of the golden calf, Exodus 32, an idol the Israelites constructed for themselves while Moses received the holy commandments of God. Even though they had just seen the glory of God revealed in Mount Sinai through smoke and the sound of trumpets, 19:7-25, the Israelites quickly abandoned their reverence and created a tangible idol to worship. This idol was something they could approach without fear, something that lacked both holiness and glory. After Moses discovered what the Israelites had done, he chose to intercede for their sin, meeting with God and asking for his mercy. He asked that God demonstrated that mercy by his continuing presence with his people. God's response to Moses shows his steadfast love and mercy, while also highlighting his holiness and glory. Developing the lesson. Number 1. The guidance of God's presence, Exodus 33:12-14. Our passage begins with Moses' first request of God, to gain greater knowledge of and guidance from God. Moses rooted the request in God's own knowledge of him. Yet, thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in my sight, verse 12. Just as God knew Moses, so he knows us, and he has our best interests at heart. Our temptation may be to doubt him, or choose what is easy for us, as the Israelites did with the golden calf, but our best interests are to have a greater understanding of God Himself and to reflect His glory as a result. The Israelites thought it was best to have a tangible, easy to understand God, but our God's holiness and glory exceed the deepest reaches of our wisdom. Moses chose a different way than the Israelites. He knew he needed God's guidance, so he asked for a deeper knowledge of God in order to lead the Israelites well. The sign of God's favor and presence with Moses would be wisdom, which comes from a relationship with Him. Likewise, the more we come to know God, the more wisdom He will give us. Our lives will be transformed when we submit to God and ask Him to reveal Himself. 2. The holiness of God's presence, Exodus 33:15-17. Moses continued his dialogue with God with the second request, for God's presence to go with His people. Without God's presence, the Israelites would be like any other nation. Although God may not visibly go with us today, as He did with the Israelites in the pillar of smoke and fire, His presence still distinguishes us from the rest of the world. The commandments God had just given Moses on Mount Sinai were intended to call the Israelites to holiness. By following these rules, Israel will be marked as different from the rest of the world. The false gods of the nations were not holy and did not require holiness from their worshippers. The living God, however, is holy and can only dwell in the midst of the Israelites if they maintain the holiness to which He called them. They would do this imperfectly and already had. So through this request, Moses was essentially asking for God's continued forgiveness. God could have refused his request and been perfectly just in doing so, for no one can achieve perfect holiness through the law. But God showed mercy to His wayward people. That mercy magnified His glory, while still demonstrating His holiness and the need for the Israelites' lives to be transformed. Although we do not need to follow the commandments of the Old Covenant, such as the specific regulations regarding worship in the tabernacle, our lives should still be different from the world because God's holiness has not changed. 3. The glory of God's presence, Exodus 33:18-23. In the final verses of our lesson, Moses asked to see God's glory. God again showed His mercy to Moses and agreed to make Himself known, thus fulfilling in part Moses' first request to know God more. The glory of the Lord reveals His character. He not only proclaimed His name to Moses, He revealed His sovereignty, His goodness, and His mercy. God's glory is also so powerful that Moses could not stand to be in His full presence. Our God is unlike any false idol. Without His mercy, we cannot stand before Him and live. Illustrating the lesson. Even though we cannot see the whole glory of God and live, it transforms us and calls us to live a life of holiness that reflects God. Concluding the lesson. Even though Moses was only able to see a part of God's glory, it was transformative. When he would speak with God, his face would become radiant. Exodus 34:29-35. Likewise, we cannot encounter the glory of God and remain the same. 2 Corinthians 3:18. Anticipating the next lesson. In the next lesson, we will examine the significance of the glory of the Lord filling the tabernacle. Practical points. Number 1. We need a mediator to stand in the breach and reconcile us to God. Exodus 33:12-13 and Psalm 106:23. 2. God's presence gives the church its worth and significance. Exodus 33:14-16. 1 Corinthians 3:16-17. 3. The indwelling Holy Spirit assures us that we are chosen children of God. Exodus 33:16, Romans 8:16. 4. We find favor in God's sight because our mediator, Jesus Christ, has found favor in his sight. Exodus 33:17, Romans 5:2. 5. God wants us to make bold requests of him. Exodus 33:18. 6. There will always be more to learn about our glorious God. Verses 19 through 23. Illustrated high points. I know thee by name. Exodus 33:12 and 17. A youth group leader offered the following icebreaker questions at the beginning of a Sunday school class. If you could have one wish granted, what would it be? The assistant leader of the class, who was also a missionary, had a surprising answer. She said she would wish to know the names of everyone in the world so that she could bring a smile to people's faces when she greeted them by name on the mission field. Illustrated high points. It feels good to be known and called by name, especially by someone we would not expect to know it. We can derive great comfort and joy from knowing that the God of the universe is on a first-name basis with us, just as he was with Moses. If thy presence go not with me, verse 15. When I was in high school, my band director asked me to attend my first annual National Brass Symposium with him in Atlanta, Georgia. Even though it was the symposium's first year, thousands of musicians showed up for it. The reason it was so successful was that dozens of the best brass players in the world were teaching and performing at it. No one knew anything about the symposium itself yet, but they did know the people involved with it. The presence of so many incredibly talented musicians distinguished the symposium from other band events. In Exodus 33, we see a similar principle. Nobody in the ancient world would have thought much of one small nation coming onto the scene. And yet, the surrounding nations knew all about Israel by the time they reached the Promised Land. They were terrified because they knew Yahweh was in the midst of the Israelites. Joshua 2:9 through 11. Golden text illuminated. And he said, Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. Exodus 33:20. Exodus 33:20 reveals the depth of God's glory. It emphasizes humanity's limitations in comprehending the fullness of his divine presence. It invites us to approach God with reverence, in awe. We learn from this verse that our infinite human vision is incapable of fully perceiving the grandeur and splendor of God's glory. Our eyes are limited to the physical, unable to comprehend the immense magnitude of his being. It is a humbling realization that the presence of God is so majestic and overwhelming that gazing upon his face would surpass our capacity to endure. While we may be unable to see God's face, his glory is pervasive and evident throughout creation. In verse 18, Moses pleaded to God, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. In his response, God granted Moses a glimpse of his goodness by allowing him to see his back, revealing a fraction of his glory. This encounter illustrates that while God's full glory remains unseen by human eyes, he graciously reveals aspects of his splendor to those who seek him. This may occur even through his creation in other ways we sometimes fail to notice. Psalm 19:1. Exodus 33:20 calls us to approach the glory of the Lord with the utmost respect. We are invited to recognize God's incomparable majesty and holiness, acknowledging our limitations and submitting to his greatness. In the presence of his glory, we are compelled to fall on our knees in humility and worship, recognizing the vast chasm between the divine and the human. God's invitation to Moses was only by his graciousness. The fullness of God's glory would have been too much for Moses or anyone to see. No one can look upon the full glory of God and live. The sinfulness of humanity keeps us from being able to see the fullness of God. Moses could only have a small glimpse of the glory of God. Even without fully beholding God's face, we can still experience the transformative power of his glory. As we seek his presence, immerse ourselves in his word, and surrender to his will, we become vessels through which his radiance shines. In 2 Corinthians 3:18, Paul wrote, "But we all, with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord." Through our relationship with Christ, we are gradually transformed into his likeness, reflecting his glory to the world around us. The limitations of our mortal vision to see the fullness of God's glory do not diminish the presence and power of his glory in our lives. We are drawn into a deeper intimacy with God as we embrace a posture of reverence and awe. Although we cannot fully see his face, we are blessed to experience glimpses of his glory, just as Moses did. And we anticipate the day when our faith is realized. We shall behold his glory full and entirely. In the meantime, let us strive to live in the radiance of his glory, constantly being transformed into his likeness and reflecting his magnificence to a world in need of his light. Have you ever looked at a light that was so bright you could hardly see? If you have ever looked directly at the sun, you know the feeling. Moses had such an encounter in Exodus 33:12 through 23. As God revealed his glory to him. In this passage, we see there is a deep connection between God's presence and his glory and holiness. Where God is, there also his glory and holiness are. They cannot be separated. 1. Moses seeks assurance of God's presence, Exodus 33:12 through 15. Earlier in chapter 33, God told Moses that he would not be in the midst of the Israelites as they advance into the promised land, verse 3. Still, Moses pleaded for God's assurance that his presence will continue to guide the Israelites on their journey. As Moses emphasized the importance of God's presence, he intuitively recognized the holiness of God. Moses understood that the presence of the holy God brings confidence and security to his people. In seeking assurance of God's presence, he recognized that God's holiness guaranteed the fulfillment of his promises and the protection of his people. This realization invites us to trust in the holiness of God. You can rest knowing that he will indeed do as he promised to do in our lives. 2. Moses desires the revelation of God's glory, Exodus 33:16 through 19. Responding to Moses' request, God promised to show his goodness to Moses and to proclaim his name before him. Moses audaciously asked to see God's glory, wanting to witness firsthand the holiness of the Almighty. In God's response to Moses, he explained that while he would pass by Moses and reveal his glory, no human can see his face and live, verse 20. This highlights that God's glory and holiness are beyond us as humans. God's glory is so awe-inspiring and transcendent that human beings cannot withstand it. The passage reinforces the eternal truth that the glory and holiness of God is beyond human comprehension, calling us to approach him with reverence and a sense of wonder. 3. Moses encounters God's holiness, Exodus 33:20 through 23. Agreeing to Moses' plea, God instructed him to stand in the cleft of the rock while he passed by. As God passed, Moses was permitted to see his back, but not his face. Moses' glimpse of God's glory was transformative. It left an indelible mark on his life, reflected by the radiant glow on his face after the encounter. 34:29 through 30. Even a glimpse of God's holiness has the power to change us, empowering us to reflect His divine radiance in the world. May we seek moments of encounters with God, embracing His holiness, and allowing it to shape our character and actions through our relationship with Jesus Christ. Exodus 33:12 through 23 illuminates the glory of God through Moses' earnest pleas and subsequent encounter with the Almighty. It highlights the significance of God's presence in shaping our confidence, reverence, and transformative experiences. God's glory is not a distant quality that is only in the heavens. It is a very real comfort to us as His people. By recognizing the presence of God as a sign, as a source of confidence, we are propelled into deeper understanding of reverence for Him. As we journey with God like the Israelites and Moses, may we constantly seek His holy presence and allow our lives to radiate His holiness to the world. Additional resources: Union Gospel Press Sunday School Lesson by Haven of Rest Missionary Baptist Church on YouTube, and Union Gospel Press Sunday School Lesson Questions by Jordan Christian Center, also on YouTube.